internal combustion engines consist of the block, heads, intake manifold, an ignition system, a cooling system, and a lubrication system, or oil system. This is the engine block. These four circles are the cylinders. The cylinders contain the pistons. Combustion happens inside the cylinder, drives the piston. The piston is connected to the crankshaft by a wrist pin and a connecting rod. And as the pistons travel through the cylinders, the crankshaft rotates, which is the main purpose of the engine. These are the heads. So what we have here is rocker arms. On one side of the rocker arms we have intake and exhaust valves. On the other side of the rocker arms we'll have a push rod. Now there's a camshaft that's driven by the crankshaft via the timing chain, and the camshaft has egg-shaped lobes on it, and the camshaft rotates. As it rotates, it makes contact with a lifter that's connected to the push rod. So when it makes contact, it pushes the push rod up. These rocker arms pivot and they open and close the intake and exhaust valves. The intake and exhaust valves are allowing intake air in for combustion through the heads into the cylinder, and the exhaust valves are allowing exhaust from combustion out of the cylinder into the exhaust manifold and to the exhaust. This is the intake manifold. It's essentially a plenum for the incoming air for combustion. So right here is the throttle body, which is what you're actually doing when you step on a gas pedal, and you're modulating the airflow to the engine through the intake manifold. So the air will come in here, and like I said, it's essentially a plenum, so the air will be distributed to the cylinders from the inside of the intake manifold. This is the ignition system. So what we have here is a battery. The battery is supplying the electricity to produce spark for combustion. We have an ignition coil, and from the ignition coil we have the distributor that distributes the spark to the cylinders in the correct firing sequence. So the coil produces the spark, sends it to this distributor, and from the distributor the spark travels through spark plug wires, to the spark plugs, and then is used for combustion with the air fuel mixture inside the cylinders. Okay, so cooling system. This is a picture of a radiator. Because there's hot combustion happening inside the engine, a lot of heat is produced, and that heat needs to be transferred out of the engine. So what you have is you have basically cooling water, but with an antifreeze mix so that it doesn't freeze when temperatures are below zero. So there will be a water pump driven from the serpentine belt on your engine, which circulates your water and antifreeze mix coolant through the block, through jackets and the head gaskets, which cools it, and then the coolant will be controlled by a thermostat. The thermostat will control how much of the coolant goes to the radiator and how much of the coolant is recirculated to the block. So when the coolant travels to the radiator, there's a fan also driven by the crankshaft, and the crankshaft will radiate the heat from the coolant via the radiator by forced convection. Okay, so maintenance. This is a picture of an oil filter. Sometimes they're a cartridge type, often they're threaded into the block. So here's the oil filter. Of course, the oil is used for lubrication of the engine. If you didn't have it, the engine would seize. These cylinders would seize inside. The pistons would seize inside the cylinders. So to do a regular oil change, you would You would drain the oil from the drain plug, which is right here, looks like on the bottom of the oil pan, and then you would just need an oil filter wrench that you would crack loose the filter, take it out, replace it with a new one, put the drain plug back in the oil pan, and fill the engine with oil. This is a picture of a dipstick. Burning of oil can always occur in an engine. You can have engine oil leaks. It's very important to maintain the level of the engine oil, and the dipstick is the best way for you to check what the engine oil level is at. So the tip of it is inside the oil pan, and you're supposed to check your oil when the engine is cold and your vehicle is on a level surface. So you would just take the dipstick out, you would wipe it off the end. There's a cross-hatched band on the end of the dipstick, and the purpose of that is to entrain some of the oil in the cross-hatched band so you can see what the level is. So you would pull it out, wipe it off, and then you would put the dipstick back in, pull it out quickly again, and look at the cross-hatched band to see what the oil level's at. Main uses of an internal combustion engine, primarily, obviously, they're generally used to drive vehicles. They do have a few other uses. Generally, the main one would be a diesel engine driving an alternator or a backup generator. The diesel engine, in particular, doesn't have all of the ignition system. It still needs the batteries for in your vehicle for all the electrical components, but it does not need a distributor. It doesn't need an ignition coil. It doesn't need spark plugs, because there's so much compression in a diesel engine that with the air-fuel mixture, the heat of compression will be enough that you'll have combustion without the need for a fire or a spark source.